Welcome to the Worth Listening podcast, where we focus on having positive and productive conversations around money. I'm your host, Lauren, a 4-time Olympian and certified financial planner. On this show, my guests share their money stories. Everyone has a unique story and experiences both wins and losses when it comes to money. My intent is to give listeners something they can relate to, something that builds their courage to be open and take control of their own money story. When I'm not creating a great show for my listeners, I'm running my company, Worth Winning, where I help individuals and families organize their finances. Check us out at worth-winning.com. All right, now on with the show. Have you ever heard the saying, you don't know what you don't know? Well, there is a lot to know when it comes to personal finances. This podcast sets out to illustrate that while no two stories are the same, there are similarities in our experiences. Customizing the basic principles into a plan specific to you is where a financial planner like me can come into play. If you want to see if we're a good fit, reach out to me at worth-winning.com. Today, Terrie Chantel is sharing her money memoir. We cover a lot of topics in this episode, from a disturbing event Terrie experienced while working in corporate America because of her race, to her struggle to really understand her identity for a while as a result of that experience. While she had some great experiences in corporate America as well, she ultimately decided the freedom that entrepreneurship provides was a better fit for her lifestyle. Her business helped people with credit repair and tax preparation, so you know she was busy. However, she wanted to find a way to reach a larger number of people without burning herself out, and so the Greenhouse Wealth Academy was born. She will soon offer affordable online courses to help everyday people with things like credit repair, taxes, and other financial topics. There is literally a wealth of information packed into this episode. Let's listen to Terrie share her money memoir. Terrie, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me, Lauren.
I'm really excited to talk to you. So why don't we just start kind of at the beginning? Can you provide a little bit of background about your childhood and what kind of environment you grew up in, where you're from? Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, I am a Southern girl from New Orleans, Louisiana. And so down south, Southern hospitality is kind of the basis of where I grew up and who I am. Real laid back and loving family, 2-parent home. My parents have been together for 30-something odd years. And I actually went to Catholic school for most of my life until I moved to Texas when I was in middle school. And my mom always stressed education and Christian upbringing and things like that. But the one thing we didn't talk a lot about was money, as is the typical story for most of us, right? But definitely taught me how to be a giver, how to tithe, how to pay my bills in terms of be responsible and be an adult. But those deep money lessons that I learned the hard way, those didn't happen until maybe close to college, when I was getting out of high school in my first year of college. So I had a typical upbringing. Moved to Texas and went to high school, graduated at 16. I started college a month after high school and just went through that. So by the time I was 20, I was already working for a big firm and traveling and in the corporate America. Bought my first house at 21, 22. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah. So I was the person that I was ready to live life. And that was a good and bad thing. Let's just say that. So I really had, because of my upbringing, although it was beautiful and great, I saw the mistakes financially. And I had this thing in my head that I'm not going to be that. So I lived life in a very logical way.
What kind of mistakes did you see growing up?
Well, one, for example, my mom, she's always worked for herself most of the time as a nurse. And there were times where our water wasn't on, or our lights weren't on and things like that. And I would see those situations. And then a couple months later, we'd have a new TV and a new couch. And then some time after that, we'd be in another situation. And I always thought, well, how is it that we were struggling this month and now we're getting new stuff? Is that a good idea? So I always saw just a little bit of the, I guess maybe, I was a kid, so I can't say if she mismanaged. You don't know the things that happened, but I saw the spending versus what our life really was at different times. And sometimes it didn't add up to me.
Was it the sort of household where there were chores and you got an allowance and you had some times where there was no money, but in the times that there were money, was there money that you were able to manage on your own for some reason?
No, actually, no. I never had an allowance. I thought that was something people did on TV. So I never had an allowance. I definitely had chores. I had things I was just supposed to do because I was supposed to do it. I was very independent. Now, there were times that my mom gave me money to do things normally a kid wouldn't have to do, but I was always naturally independent with money. I remember being 10 or 11 and her giving me $150 and dropping me off in the mall and saying, go get your school clothes. My friends, their parents weren't doing it at that age. And I remember 579 was the store back then. Remember that store?
Yes, girl.
Girl, yes. And they had these corduroy pants for $10 and all these pants. And I went to Baker's and got my first pair of heels. So that $100 stretched. I came back with a lot of stuff. And I remember my mom being proud of me, trusting me that I wouldn't get 3 things with my $100. I was able to stretch it. So I had opportunities because I saw her go to the bank. She used to have me go to the bank and she would always get money, $100 bills. And she would get all of these bank envelopes and she put her bills in different envelopes. And I saw her paying bills. My mother is the hardest working person I know. She is the one person that I know can outwork me when it comes to work ethic any day. So even though I didn't maybe have my own money, I saw my mom, the way she handled business and the way she worked and paid bills because I was with her a lot of the time when she did that. But I also saw how she spent money. For some reason, I was able to see that even as a child, I would have made a different decision. I probably wouldn't have gotten that big TV and I knew the lights were off or the water was off that previous month. So definitely I lived my life trying not to do the things that I saw. And sometimes that's a good thing because you don't know the whole story. And sometimes it's not a good thing because when you're figuring things out on your own as a child versus talking about it with your parents and communicating, you may come to misinformed conclusions, right?
Yes.
So because of that, because I was coming up with my own solutions to how to manage money, I ended up making those mistakes later on and I learned from them.
What about your father? You said it was a 2-parent household. You said a lot of the influences seem to have come from your mother. Do you remember anything about your father and money man?
Oh, yes. My father was I would work 2 or 3 jobs and hand my mother the money and just give me $50 for beer and cigarettes and I'm good. That's what I saw. So with him, I learned that when it came to a man, there were no excuses. My dad worked around the clock. And so he set the bar when it came to that side of it. I'm not sure how well he can manage money or not. Compared to my mom, probably it was that way for a reason. Mm-hmm. So with him, I just learned, both of them I learned how to work hard. But with him, I understood that whether I'm the breadwinner or not, you're supposed to be able to work until you almost pass out if you have to for your family. So yeah, and that's what I learned from him. My father, to this day, he lives 40 minutes away. I can say, Dad, I really need 2 eggs right now and I don't feel like going to the store. He'll come and do it. So, he spoiled me in that way. Of course, he had his vices as well. So I learned from both their good and their bad. And it shaped me in ways that were extreme that I had to kind of back out of in a way. And it shaped me in good ways as well. You don't know how you're affected until you start getting in your own relationships and start managing your own money. And you realize, okay, I'm this way because I'm afraid of my water being turned off. So I don't treat myself. Or I'm always in this less than abundant mindset because I'm trying not to repeat what I saw. And maybe I was a little judgmental and it made me judgmental for a while and I didn't know it because I was judging my parents. So now I'm pushing 40 and you get through all of that stuff and you come to your happy medium of how to live.
No, I think you bring up a really good point about this money emotion that is ingrained in us, and it is the sum of the experiences that we've had over life. And so sometimes it manifests itself in a way as I didn't see a lot. And so it's important for me to have a lot because I didn't before. Mm-hmm. And then other times it is I didn't have a lot. And so even though I'm making a really good living, I'm spending every dollar I get because I don't know what to do when I have because I've never had.
Right.
And so for every person, it's different. But we are a collection of these experiences we've had over the period of our life and the way we've decided to deal with them and be transformed or affected by them or not.
Exactly, exactly. And you have to have an open mind. That's the thing. You have to not have pride, not have ego, and always come from a place where I know a lot, but I don't know it all. And maybe the knowledge and that principle was good for me in that season of life, but maybe now it's time to change and be different. And so you have to be malleable with yourself and your mindset as well. And that always leaves room to grow. Because sometimes when you're in this space of you're financially educated and you know all about financial literacy, if you're not careful, you can be judgmental or you can be too rigid and you're not living life.
Mm-hmm.
Or you're judging people for the way they live. And you have to have balance with that and you have to keep that balance. So sometimes there were years where I felt like I'm not dedicating money to decorating my house. As long as it's nice, I'm good. And then you're looking at people with way less, right? Financially, you know, they're not making as much money as you. And you're like, man, they went to Disney World and she has a bad living room set. You're like, like I would like that, So you find that balance. It's about all that, but it's just about being a person and living your best life at the same time. What's right for you?
Yes.
What feeds not just your future and your goals, but what feeds your soul? Because once you've mastered, I know how to make money, I know I'm capable. Once you've reached that phase and you've conquered, I know how to make money. I know how to start a business. I've been running the business. You realize, but am I happy? Do I have the lifestyle that I want? Is the thing that I've built sustainable? Does it meet my goals as a person, as a lifestyle, and my money goals? And so you start to marry the two, is what I found. And for some people, that may mean, you know what? For example, when I was in corporate America, that was my dream at one point. I was in IT, I was a computer programmer. My degree is in computer information systems. And when I entered that world, oh my gosh, Lauren, I was around a completely different set of people. First of all, when I left from New Orleans to Dallas, I was in a completely different world. I just was. The nature of the city in Irving, Texas, a suburb. And my friends had lived in gated communities and they had maids. And I was like, wow. But their moms drove Hondas. So I was like, wow, this is different. And when I got in corporate, in IT, I started off as a computer programmer. That field, especially back then, this is back in maybe 2003, 2018. Oh my gosh. I was the only Black, the only woman, and the youngest for the first 3 years of my career. And I got on with this big firm called Bearing Point, KPMG. And I interviewed for the job on Friday. Monday, I was in New York City, had never been there. I was 20 years old, wasn't even old enough to rent a car. And they said, okay, we're going to hire you. We're going to send you to New York to learn this computer language that you've never heard of. But go there for a week, take the class, and then we're going to send you to Halliburton, the oil and gas company. And you're going to be on that team because you're going to have to use that language to create these financial reports for Halliburton, for the executives there. So I'm flying back and forth from Dallas to Houston every week. I'm jet setting. Right. So I'm like, this is the life. I went to college, not me. I make more than my student loans. Hey, it worked for me, the college dream. So I'm flying back and forth from Dallas to Houston. And my first project was to create this dynamic report. You open up and it's this digital map of the world and it had these little icons of oil rigs. And my job was that they can open up this map of the world, click on the oil rig, and find out how much money that oil rig made and all types of financial information. I had to make that happen. So, I had to meet with the executives to know, how do you want these reports to look with money, all that type of stuff. And it took about 6 months for me to do that. That was my project alone. But I was sitting in a room with all men and no one was Black. And they were the best people, the coolest people. But when you're sitting in the room with anybody in IT listening to this knows that you don't sit in cubicles, you kind of sit in the team room around the table. So 8 hours a day, you're in the IT version of a locker room and you hear the decisions that they're making and you hear the types of things that they do with their money. And they're talking about this and it really started to shape me. It was the next phase of my life that started to shape me.
What kind of differences were there in the conversations that were being had by them versus conversations that you were having in your circle of friends or your community?
Well, one, for example, they were the first reason that I invested in stock. They all decided, one guy was really into it. They all decided to invest in some stock. It was a ZIXI, ZIXI. And I joined in. And it went up today, it went down today, or I found this stock out. And so I took $1,000. I had no idea what I was doing. And they taught me how to go on TD Ameritrade and invest the money in there. And so we did things like that together. Like, let's all invest in this one stock and let's see, like, it's okay, Terrie, we should sell. Things like that. Because of the circle I was around, I kept that stock for so long, I forgot about it. And the times where it had gone up, I had made 7,000 or 8,000 one year, and then it went down. I was like, gosh, I forgot I had this because I was so young. So things like that.
So even though you felt yourself being the odd woman out as it pertains to race, gender, and age, it sounds like it was a pretty inclusive environment. And despite those conversations not being had in the community that you were regularly interacting with, that you had this and they did bring you in on it and kind of were open with helping you learn this information.
Exactly. And I was never exposed to that outside of it as far as just my peers, right? So different things. Again, the cars that they drove and the things that they did with their money and the houses. And it was just different. It was just different. It was new. And everyone sitting in that room made six figures. So it taught me that my idea of what it looked like to make six figures wasn't what I thought. I thought that meant you were balling out. And I was 20 years old. I wasn't making six figures. At my first job, I was making almost $50,000 right out of college. So it really reshaped and corrected my image of what it looks like to finally make that six figure is the goal, right?
Right.
And I hit that before I was 30 because I moved up so fast in my career. And it just really gave me a viewpoint that I did not have my entire life until I got in corporate America. It really did.
And I think it's a really good point. What's inspiring in me listening to your story is that we know that there is a racial wealth divide.
Oh, yes.
We know that we're in a hostile environment nowadays with racial injustice and things like that. But we know that there is not more separation than there is collective minds that are out there. And to just point out this idea that, yeah, I realized I was different. I was the minority in the room, but these people brought me along, and that all white people are not bad.
No. Yeah.
I just think it's really important to have those examples of an environment where there was just one of you and that you were completely outnumbered, but it wasn't about color or race or age or anything like that. It was about learning and being a part of a community. And so I think sometimes we just get so hung up on the divide, that we forget that there is a community of collectiveness that exists still today. So yeah, thanks for pointing that out.
Thank you. And I was in IT from age 20 to 31, maybe. And I'm not going to lie. There were maybe a couple incidents, one real incidents where race was the issue. But it usually came from the clients or the executives that hired my firm.
Right.
Which is a different set of people. I was around IT guys and, the team. But after that project at Halliburton, I got on the project with Bear Stearns, which is an investment bank, and I was going back and forth to New York.
Was an investment bank, huh? ...
Yeah, it was, yeah. So I was on the project with Bear Stearns, and my name is Terrie. You really can't tell anything from that name. And when they finally saw my names on emails a lot, and once a week, we had an office in there, but we would go meet them once a month at the actual Bear Stearns building. And again, I get to this building with my entire team and my bosses and things like that. And it's just a typical meeting. And I was definitely the minority in that room. So these are the top executives. I was the only Black, not the only woman, but definitely the youngest and the only Black. And I'm maybe 22 at this point. So I'm looking like a baby. And I get to this meeting and I can tell that they didn't realize I was Terrie because I communicated through emails, but they were shocked that I didn't match what they thought. And that meeting was maybe at 9 a.m. I had been on that project close to 2 months. By noon that day, I was off the project.
Oh, wow.
I got back to my office. My boss, she was actually Indian. And she came and she had this sick to her stomach look on her face. And I was in my cubicle and she walked up and she sat down and you could tell she was just trying to find the words And she said to me, the clients gave us a call after the meeting. They were wondering if you were local or were you flying in? And I told them you were flying in, and they asked about the cost that your flights and things. And we told them, and they said that to deal with the budget, they'd rather find somebody in New York. Now, the problem with that was there were 12 people on my team. 10 people also flew in from random cities. I said, okay, well, let me know when. And I was just off that project, not with my company. And she said, well, you can just kind of leave today. You just enjoy the city, take the rest of the day off. And since I'm off the project like today, like right now.
Did you know in that moment that it was about race?
Oh, yes, definitely. Her face, I mean, she almost had tears in her eyes because she knew. And she was a minority as well. I had been on the project for 2 months. I went to a meeting at 10 a.m. I was perfectly doing fine. And by noon, after the meeting, I'm off of the project. And so it was a race thing. And we knew it. And there was no way to prove it. But that was the story that they gave, that they wanted someone local in my position, but everyone traveled.
Right.
So that was a season of my life. And that was, again, my first job out of college. It hurt. And I went into this corporate shell of myself. I said that I'm going to become whatever I need to be so I don't get fired. So I went into this mode for years of, I'm not going to dress a certain way. I'm not going to wear dangling earrings. Let me go to Old Navy and get those boring looking blue jeans. Let me buy some cardigans. Let me just play the part so that they see my work ethic and not the thing that got me.
The color of my skin.
Yeah, and that put me in a box for a while, and I didn't realize it. And I moved up. I became when you walked into the room, that young Black girl in the back was actually all of those white people's bosses. And it was great. But the sacrifice that I had to make for myself personally slowly ate away at who I was. And I wasn't me anymore, but it happened over time. It happened over maybe a 10 period time. So I had the Terrie me. So my Facebook name and all that was different. I didn't want them to find me. I didn't want to connect with them that way. And after a while, once I climbed that ladder again with business, I know my stuff. My resume speaks for itself. I began to shed that. I am who I am. She comes in here with tights and Uggs on.
Yeah.
Why do I have to wear these heels? We just have to do a little bit extra just to be respected the same way. I knew I couldn't do what everyone else did, or there's a potential that I don't get certain opportunities. And I got weary of that. And that was the beginning of me wanting to leave corporate America, because I felt like what I bring to the company and this skill set, I can do for myself. I can transfer this skill set over. And that's what I ultimately did.
And I mean, thank you for sharing that, because like you said, we talked about the good side of it. And it's important to point out that it's not all bad. There is some good, but a lot of what we struggle through as African Americans or people of color is, like you said, this kind of imposter syndrome. The saying is we have to work twice as hard to get half as much. And I think it shed some real light on the way that we sometimes have to crawl inside of ourselves and match down who we are and our identity in order to fit the bill of what is the norm and feel like we can climb the corporate ladder. And anybody would be eaten up by that after years and years of trying to fit into a box so that you can be accepted when you are something else. Why can't I wear these twists in my hair? Or like you said, why can't I wear these jeans and still be a smart person? Why am I the sum of what I outwardly look like versus the criteria that's given on my job description that I'm meeting and surpassing?
Exactly. And it took me a while, Lauren. This is the first time, every time I tell that story, I would have to fight back tears because it hurt that bad. And to know what it did to me. And when I left corporate America and I first started showing up online in entrepreneurship, I didn't realize how thick of a shell I had built until I no longer had to do that. And I had to figure out, who am I without having this obligation to be someone else?
To pretend, yeah.
Yeah, you don't even know you're pretending that much. That's the thing. You just think that you're being professional. That's what we label it as. I'm just going to be the professional me. But I'm so free now. I'm so happy and I'm so free.
So tell us about it. Yeah. So you left corporate America and you are now?
I am Terrie Chantel. So I always had my tax business on the side. I started that maybe 3 years into my IT career. because I realized this isn't fulfilling me. Like, I'm making money, but I think there's something else for me. And tried a bunch of stuff, landed on taxes, and I always had a tax business. I had a baby or two in between, and I took a year or so off once, and I did my tax business full time for one season. I went to Ace Check Cashing. If you've ever heard of that, they have this lobby space, and I found out that they rent out their lobby space. And I went to IKEA, bought some desks. I paid rent for the tax season because I felt that would give me an influx of business. I signed up at a community college under a CPA's tax preparation class, and I went to the night classes, ran my tax business in the daytime. If I had something that came my way that I didn't know, took it to my CPA teacher. So I made sure I had a mentor and access. And when I did my first year, I had 99 clients, I believe it was. I mean, I hustled that first year. Now that corporate Terrie paid off now because I knew how to perform. And yeah, it was amazing. I said, I could do this for, the year before I did it just at home, like friends and family. I said, I want to take the show on the road. And I rented the lobby space and I would pass out my cards and people were coming in there anyway. So it was a good demographic. And that set of clients was the beginning of the basis of my business because I was referral based pretty much from then on. I just would start doing whole families and friends and things like that. And so I went back to work though because it got scary. That first year I didn't make the money I was supposed to make.
Were you charging too little?
I was charging way too little. 99 clients. I think I made maybe $12,000 or $13,000 that tax season. That should have been like 3 times more.
Right, 100 clients. I mean, I think this brings up a good point about entrepreneurship. And one of the things that's hard to figure out initially is, I want to do this thing. I'm really good at this thing. I have clients coming through the door, but really working the numbers to see what do I need to make ends meet and to meet income goals. How am I going to charge accordingly? Yeah.
Exactly. And I just didn't know because I felt like it took me 10 minutes to do that. 152 when it should have been way more. But the way I was looking at the time, like I made $13,000 in 1 month and it only cost me $2,000 to start this business. That was good. I thought, okay, wow. But I got through all those lessons and charging your worth and all that kinds of things. And I went back to work though, because I had still only been in IT less than 5 years. And I felt like I can't walk away yet. I just can't. I just still have more to go in this career. So what I did was I rented an office space in a suite, one exit down from my job. And I would go there in the afternoons and handle my personal clients. And then I had a little franchise. I hired someone to work the ACE and I trained her and set up a little remote setup and things. So I paid her $400 a week and then she get a commission per tax return. Mm-hmm. And that's how I made additional money. Actually, she's still with me to this day. 2 people are. So that's how I make additional money to add to my tax business because I decided to go back to work. And I always ran it on the side until I decided to go full time. And I thought, and this is something that I was wrong about for so long. I said, when my side hustle meets my salary at work, then I'll go full time. But that really was unrealistic because there was no way I could make 6 figures on the side with a service-based business and not kill myself trying to work full time. And my full time job was like a business in itself. So there was a leap of faith that had to happen in order for me to do that. It's like, Terrie, you're not going to be able to meet it unless you give it all. And so I had to do that leap of faith and make a plan. I got laid off, so it happened much sooner than what I thought. But and that's when I just decided not to go back.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too about this idea of how do you leave your 9 to 5 to pursue your side hustle or your entrepreneurial passion full time. And what I often recommend to clients is making sure that you get that emergency fund in place and making sure that you're reproducing at least 60% of that income. Like you said, 100% is too much because if it's 100%, then you pretty much doubled your income and you probably are working yourself to the bone. But you want to make sure that you have some reoccurring revenue from the side hustle that will be able to sustain you. But it's also about knowing and understanding your expenses and being willing to cut back. You might be making 100K over here and you can duplicate 60K there, which means you need to be able to live off of 60K or less. Ideally, a lot less. And really being passionate enough about what you're doing to make those sacrifices in the short term while you build the business up, or to move in with a roommate or go to a 1-bedroom instead of a 2-bedroom or whatever the case may be. But yeah, really understanding how to be able to do that so that your leap of faith or your leap into the next thing gives you the best chance at success.
And you hit the nail on the head when you saying being passionate enough about what you're doing to do what it takes to make it work. That is something that I think I almost missed when I started other endeavors, because you have to chase purpose and not money.
Yes.
And when you chase money,
don't, Patrice Washington.
Yes, exactly. I thought it was Tiffany, but it was someone said that. I was going to say Tiffany, either the Budgetnista or Patricia. One of them said that, and I was like, that is so true, because when I started other business endeavors that I didn't stick with, not because it wasn't profitable, because I really wasn't passionate about it. And you won't sustain. You may figure out how to make it work, but eventually it'll show in either how committed you are to make it work, or it'll show in how well you serve people. So you have to be passionate about it. You got to be.
Okay, so you did the tax preparing for a while, and then somehow you got into credit repair. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, of course, I have my credit story, all that. But doing in the tax business, I was helping people with their credit just by nature. You're in people's finances and businesses. And when I was 18, I believe, when I got my first credit card, and I only had one credit card until I was 30 years old. I was terrified of credit. I made sure I had good credit, but I was not getting in debt, and credit cards meant debt to me. So I had one credit card until I was 30. And I realized the first time I pulled my credit that there were things in my name from my childhood, and I had to start working on how to get them off. And that's how I got into understanding credit. And that happened when I was around 18 years old. I had all kinds of stuff in my name that I had to get cleaned off. And no one really taught me about credit. And that sparked that passion in me. Like I said, I always had that natural passion of just all things finance related. And so when I would have my clients and we would talk about things, I would help them. There were many times I pulled their credit reports for them and say, gave them advice. And so when I went full time, the tax business is only that first season. I said, well, I can start a credit repair business to fill the rest of the year. And I'm already doing it, and I have the time, and I know how to start and run a business. And I had a skill set from corporate that made it really easy. I ran teams of 30 people sometimes with $1 million projects. So for me, starting a business was like, oh, Gary, I just figured out I'll go do this XYZ creative, that strategy comes easy for me. So that's how I got into credit that way, because I was kind of already doing it. And I just made it official once I went full time.
Got it. Okay, two things. The first is you mentioned that you had stuff on your credit from your childhood. And could you just kind of pause, rewind, let the listeners know what that means? Because some people are like, wait, how'd you get something on your credit from your childhood? You didn't have credit when you were a kid. And they may not be aware of how that happens to people.
Yes. So you can put things in your kid's name if you can't get approved. And that's what happened to me. So I had a light bill and a water bill and maybe an old cable bill. So things that my parents did because they weren't probably able to get some without a deposit or something. I'm not sure how it happened. So when you're opening certain accounts, they just need a name, a social, and a social security card. That's why you should protect your credit and get monitored and things like that, because some things are fairly easy just to set up in your name without much verification. And so I had old collection accounts that I had to fight to get off of my credit history.
And so you learned about how to clean up your personal credit, and then you started doing it for others. Can you talk a little bit about what credit repair is? Because I know sometimes people are a little bit nervous about their credit isn't good, or they got a whole bunch of credit card debt, and repairing your credit and paying down debt are kind of two different things. But what is the credit repair business, and what kind of people are eligible for getting help or via a credit repair service?
Right. So when it comes to your credit reports, the agencies that maintain that information, it's like your report card on how well you pay your bills. Just like when you go to school, if you do your work and you do the right thing, you get A's. If you don't, you get F's. And so just by looking at your report card, I can tell whether you're a hard worker or not. Same thing with your credit report. Just by looking at that one score, it's meant to tell lenders whether you're good or bad at paying back money that you owe. And that report is held by Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. And your credit report is something that just has, if you paid late, it's going to show that. If you didn't pay someone, it's going to show that. But there's also a governing entity that manages and governs the agencies that create those reports. And they have certain rules. They can't just put anything on your report and it's not true, because anyone can say, hey, she didn't pay me, let me put it on her report. And then the only way you can get it off is if you pay me. Well, what if that amount is wrong? I don't owe you $100. I owe you $65, or you didn't even contact me to let me know that I owe you. You just put this on my credit report. That's not fair. So there's something called the Fair Credit Reporting Act. And basically it says that before someone puts something on your credit report, they have to go a certain way to let you know about it, give you chances to pay it. And there's also the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. These two governing rules are meant to protect you so that your credit report is accurate. And anything on your credit report has to be both accurate and verifiable, meaning you need to be able to prove collection agency that the information you put on my report is correct, and you have gone through the proper steps to notify me prior to putting this on my report. If you don't, then the FCRA says that if it's not accurate, or if you can't verify through paperwork or certain means that what you put on this report is accurate, you have to delete it. And so the credit repair is going through all of those bad things on your credit report, writing letters to the different agencies or people and saying, hey, verify this first, make sure it's accurate. If you can't prove to me that this is right, then you must delete it. And credit repair is that whole process.
So are mistakes pretty frequent then? Because I see frequently people advertising about credit repair, but this sounds different. Like if I have $70,000 in credit card debt and I bought all that stuff and I know I bought all that stuff, I don't go to a credit repair person for that?
So there's accurate and verifiable. Now, so let's give the real, okay? Most people will say, let's say you had an old credit card from 7 years ago and you never paid it off, okay? And it's that old. No, let's say 5 years. 5 years ago and you've never paid it off. What a credit repair agency will first advise you to do is say, hey, they sold this to a collection agency for pennies on the dollar. So you owed $10,000, but they sold it to the collection agency XYZ for $200. They are trying to make that profit off of you by collecting the entire amount. So when we're dealing with those collection agencies, we're saying, first of all, prove to me that this amount is correct. A lot of the times when they purchase it from the original creditor, they really didn't purchase all of the documents and the things that can help them verify this amount is correct. So they have to delete it. So a lot of times, even though you did owe Chase for that credit account because they sold it to a collection agency and they have nothing to prove, they have to delete it. So this is saying that now you have instances where Chase still owns the debt. They have everything. They have all of your statements, everything that you signed. No matter how many times we write a letter to them, they're going to be able to say this is accurate, this is verifiable. You have to then just negotiate and pay that off. So people think, oh, I'm just going to get out of paying everything. That's not necessarily the case. You may, if it's sold to a collection agency, get that stuff off. You live with bad credit for a long time, but you can get it off and not have to pay it. That does happen a lot. But there's also the other side of it where it is accurate. You did do it. It is verifiable. They have your statements. They have the credit application that you signed. You did it. You have to just negotiate and pay that off.
So it's not good practice to buy whatever you want and then say, I'm going to just go ahead and get my credit repaired and dispute all these things and I'm going to win. That's bad idea, people. Bad idea.
Yes, but we do advise, depending on what's on your credit report, let's try to see if it's accurate and verifiable first, because if you can get it off, that's a great thing. If it's a collection agency and they can't verify this and Chase has written that off, they've already written that off their books, they sold it to this company for $200, you're really just paying them a profit. They really buy it for pennies on the dollar, these debts, the collection companies do.
And then they're also taking a gamble because they're not getting all the paperwork. So they're hoping that you pay it back without asking for the paperwork or getting help from a credit repair company.
And guess what? The reason why they're in that business is because they know most consumers aren't educated to know that they can ask for verification first. So they always are on the upside. If they buy 100 accounts, probably 80 of those people are just going to pay it. So the 20 that disputed it, that's no loss to them because the profit from all of those other accounts far outweighs the people. Oh, we'll just delete it. We'll just delete it for you because we get. So that's why the education part is important.
Education is key. Yes. That was really great information. Thanks so much for sharing that with our listeners. So tell us a little bit about where you are now and what is life? Are you still doing taxes? Are you still doing credit repair? Have you moved on to something else? You mentioned really trying to focus on work-life balance and where you are in a different place in life. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm launching my online school, Greenhouse Wealth Academy, that I'm so excited about. When I moved into the online space, fairly quickly, I garnered a social media presence with a large following, and I would just teach lessons on Facebook Live all the time for free, giving this information. And that launched sort of unexpectedly, lessons and classes that people were wanting from me. And now I am putting that into an online academy called Greenhouse Wealth Academy. And it's basically all the lessons, how-to courses on finances, how to fix your own credit, things you need to know about business taxes, basically practical lessons for the everyday person to really be able to educate and do things for themselves to be able to get ahead financially. So Greenhouse Wealth Academy is sort of me bringing all of my knowledge from taxes and credit together and giving it to the community so that they know the things they need to know for their business taxes and how to fix your own credit and how to resolve some of the things that we talked about here. So that's launching in September. And I'm so excited about that. I'm speaking at FinCon in September as well. So I've gotten a lot of opportunities from just showing up, talking about this stuff on social media. I've been speaking and things like this. So that's where I'm at in life right now, is kind of transitioning a little bit out of the one-on-one to the one-to-many.
Yes, and one-to-many, it seems to be something that's a lot more scalable from the income perspective. You put in the hard work on the front end to create the course. And I mean, of course, it's hard work to continue to market it. But if you can get those many, then your time is better spent versus one person, 1 hour at $150 an hour or whatever the case may be. There's only so many hours in a day. There's only so much you can do. And so I think that's why online businesses are becoming so popular.
Yes, exactly. You have to put your work in. If you can figure out how to get to the one-to-many, the first thing, that's great. But I put my work in to build up to that. I put in my time, and you learn a lot on the one-to-one. My breadth of knowledge, 14 years of working one-to-one, it definitely expands your knowledge. And now business is evolving. I didn't think that in the beginning. I thought how I started is just what I was going to do, which is going to get bigger. But really, you evolve, and the way you start your businesses and what you decide to do evolves as well.
Yeah, and I mean, as the world evolves, you need to be able to pivot and move forward. Otherwise, you'll get left behind. And I think you bring up a good point, too, about getting the experience under your belt with the one-to-one so that you can serve the one-to-many and being able to provide a really valuable product versus just a product. Because a lot of people are very good at marketing a thing and they'll sell it to you and it's a bunch of baloney. So getting the one-to-one experience that's going to allow you to produce something that's very valuable that people can do on their own.
Yeah.
Because people are busy. They're trying to fix their credit in the middle of the night nowadays, between jobs, between kids. And a lot of people are do-it-yourselfers. If you give me the information and teach me how to fish, I'm happy to go out there and do it myself. There are still people that are going to require one-on-one guidance and need the accountability of a coach. And that's where I kind of come into play as a financial planner and a financial coach, helping people, walking them through and the hand holding. But like you said, everyone has to transition at some point to what's going to be the best fit for their lifestyle. So speaking of lifestyle, you have 4 boys in your household. What are you teaching them about money?
Oh, everything. I'll tell you a quick story. We went to church this past Sunday, and on the ride home, I always ask each one to give me a synopsis of what they learned. And I don't know if you've heard of him. His name is Chris Brown. I'd never heard of him, but he was the money man. And the sermon was all about money and how to, manage it and all that kinds of stuff, and 5 principles to invest and all that. And so my nephew, who's 16, I said, "So what'd you learn new?" He said, "Well, he talked about how to become a millionaire by investing." He said, "But He talked about, I know already, so it was really nothing new. And that just made me so happy. I was like, I'm doing my job. So I definitely sit them down and get the marker board and drill in their head about retirement and drilling in their head, especially about generational wealth and what I'm going to try to leave them. And they need to understand the concept of leaving your kids to pick up where you left off and not starting from the beginning. I don't want them to start from the beginning. So they know about credit. They understand taxes. I just try to incorporate. I try to teach them what I didn't know versus giving them what I didn't have. And that's the principle that I try to live by.
I love that. Teach them what you didn't know versus giving them what you didn't have. Yes.
Yes, that's my principle with him is equipping them with that. And I have to balance that out a little bit because one of my kids, he's a little cheap. Like, Mom, that was $10. I'm like, okay, babe, I know I teach you about money, but we can spend $10.
Right. This has been so wonderful. Okay, so now we're moving into what I like to call the final sprint. So I have some rapid fire questions for you to wrap up our episode. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right. Your worst money habit?
Holding on to it.
Okay. Best money habit?
Saving.
Kind of similar, best and worst. Your strength is also your weakness. You need to live a little. Is that what you're saying?
Sometimes I'm thugging it for no reason. Girl, get your radio fixed in your car.
Right. All right. You got $20 in your pocket right now. What do you spend it on?
Food.
Especially with poor boys. Somebody's always hungry.
It's my de-stressor. I'll get some oysters.
Something you do for fun that doesn't cost anything.
Movies. Netflix. Oh, that costs something, right?
Yeah, $7, $8 a month now, I think it's up to.
Yeah, well, games. I'm a board game person.
Okay.
My kids, yeah.
Worst advice you've ever received?
Live today. You're going to have the money today. Just live today. Tomorrow will care for itself.
Yeah. Best advice you ever received?
Purchase your first house as an investment property.
Okay, I like it.
Yes, instead of a personal home.
Last but not least, could you share with us one thing you'd like to improve about your personal finances in the upcoming year?
It's mine, but it's my kids. I want to be more aggressive with all of their IRAs and having a more straight line plan for their IRAs for their retirement.
Awesome. Kids with retirement plans. Do you hear that?
That's my focus. It's actually on my goal spreadsheet. That's my focus.
That is wonderful.
To get on a system of allowance to regularly deposit to the IRA.
Yes. Smashing the racial wealth divide by creating generational wealth. I like it. Yes. Terrie, thanks so much for being on the show today. We've made it to the finish line. You are standing on the podium. You are a worth listening champion. Is there anything else you want to tell us to shout yourself out? This is your time to shine.
This is Terrie Chantel, and Greenhouse Wealth Academy is launching September 2018. Make sure you look it up, greenhousewealthacademy.com, or you can find me at terriechantel.com, full of practical how-to lessons for regular people like us that will make you take action and not just learn.
All right. Terrie, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoyed listening to Terrie's Money Memoir. She did a great job of sharing both the good and bad experience she had as an African-American woman working in a field dominated by white men. I think sharing experiences, both good and bad, are important to help provide people with some perspective on what others are experiencing. Ultimately, we can choose to acknowledge there is a problem and be part of the solution, or continue to pretend that this does not exist because you don't see these events in your day-to-day life. There are many situations where doing nothing is the same as doing the wrong thing, and this would be one. I encourage every listener to join the conversation and be intentional about doing your part to create a world where we are judged by the content of our character, not the color of our skin. You guys know where it comes from. Our word of the day today, racial wealth divide. Earning a middle-class income does not guarantee middle-class economic security. White households in the middle-income quintile own nearly 8 times as much wealth as middle-income Black earners, and 10 times as much wealth as middle-income Latino earners. This disconnect in income earned and wealth owned is visible across the entire spectrum between these groups. Now, if the middle class were to be defined by wealth rather than income, Black and Latino families in the middle income quintile would need to earn 2 to 3 times as much as white families in order to enter the middle class. This is one reason that educating yourself is so important. There are plenty of initiatives working to help address this major problem. Institute for Policy Studies and Prosperity Now are 2 great organizations that have done extensive research and have very good resources to provide you with more information. We have a long way to go, and one way I can see us starting to make change is to keep the financial conversations going. Remember, it's not about the numbers, it's about the strategies. Thank you for listening today. We hope you found this episode worth listening to. Don't forget, if you have financial questions, suggestions for a guest, or would like to share your own money memoir, to contact us through our website, worth-listening.com.